Hi, everyone. Just closed my stand goal. That's awesome. It's a good day. I'm just going to look at my stats for a second, you guys. Just kidding. Well, I feel like you're like 2 feet away from me. Seems like, how did the...
Should I move over?
No. Say it like this. Hi, everyone. My name's David. Welcome. We're glad you're here. This is the third day of your workshops for those of you who are taking workshops, because how many people are here who aren't taking workshops this week? Look at you. Holy crap. Thanks for coming. I guess, like, you know, having two superstars like Cleyvis and Megan are going to pack a house, I guess, aren't they? Right? Cleyvis Natera, big round of applause. Local artist Megan Hinton, big round of applause. We are very happy about tonight's lineup. It's going to be really fun. We're also experimenting with, I don't know if you noticed this, an alternate configuration of the mic thing. What do you think? Looks good? I'm just going to point out things all night that you haven't noticed. Okay, before we get started, there's some great progress on the progress. That was totally my Canadian coming out. It just said progress. Sorry about that. Okay, not enough coffee or too much, one of the two. The sign-up sheet looks great. We're on to the second page. Very proud of all of you. But there's more we can do. So if you haven't signed up, please do. You won't regret it. It's going to be the best. I was going to say the best night of your life. I won't go that far, but it's going to be a pretty special night. If it is the best night in your life, maybe there's some thinking to do about your life choices, but I'm just kidding. I'm just working on my tight 10 for something. Okay. Sign-up sheet is waiting for you. I'd also like to remind you that we have our honor tax, which supports the Native Land Conservancy and Mashpee. We'd be grateful if you would consider making a tax-free donation. There is a URL and a QR code against on the back table. And Atan will point it out he's pointing now in the general direction of the poster, but if you want more specifics, he will show you where that is. So I would be grateful if you can consider that. Cleyvis and Megan will both be signing books at the back after their talks. We have some really pretty merch back there. You just check it out. Also, books from other of this week's faculty, this summer's faculty on this bookcase here. Also, lots more books by previous faculty, previous fellows, other people associated with the Fine Arts Work Center and with the Outer Cape. So check it out in the bookstore between the two halves of the gallery. Also check out the exhibition that we have up, which is really wonderful, called Making Space, Painting Time, curated by Jerome Green and Sean Horton from our staff. And finally, what am I going to ask? Cell phones. Who said that? You get a free muffin tomorrow morning. Cleyvis is my favorite audience member. She laughs at everything I say. Okay. Okay, we're going to start with Megan Hinton. And to kick off that celebration, we're going to welcome up one of her students to the stage. Please welcome, hang on a second, because we switched the order, and now I'm kind of confused here. Martha Rothman, come on up.
Is this okay? Okay. I want to thank Falk and Megan Hinton for the privilege of being part of the workshop this week, Expansive Painting. It's the second time for me to experience her teaching at Falk after several workshops at other places in Provincetown and Truro, but this is the best. Megan Hinton is a painter known for reconfiguring genres of landscape, figurative, and object painting. Her art utilizes painting's historic content and technique with found and discarded materials, which we're doing this in the workshop too, to investigate line, color, shape, surface, and scale. This fusion of content, installation, photography, and printmaking She truly defies categorization, although her work has a distinctive mark all its own. Hinton holds an MFA in Interdisciplinary Arts from Mills College, where she won the Hung Lui Painting Prize. In 2024, Provincetown Art Association and Museum honored Hinton with the prestigious annual Award for Artistic Excellence. And she had a wonderful exhibit at PAM in honor of that. In 2019, at the Provincetown Museum, where she worked on exhibitions by artists Zara Khan, James Lachey, and forthcoming in 2027, Erin Woodbury. Currently, she's the archivist working on a catalogue raisonné for the late sculptor Irene Honchu. Hope I'm pronouncing that right. Hinton's art writing, yes, she's a writer and scholar as well as a visual artist. Her art writing is featured regularly in Provincetown Arts Magazine. Her work can be found this summer at the Provincetown Art Society's Mary Heaton Vorse House and at farm projects in Wellesley. She's been teaching youth and adult education for the past 18 years on the Outer Cape, and this week is her 4th summer workshop at Falk. Tonight you will learn more about Hinton's unique approach as you hear her speak and as she shows her most recent work and also some of what her students have been doing in the expansive painting studio.
Hi. Thanks, Martha. Martha, you've been a rock in my classes for me, and I always appreciate your deep attention to painting and how to work it out. So thank you for that nice introduction. Thank you, friends, for being here. Is this okay? Is this good? Yeah. All right. Yeah, I think so. Does this clicker work? Yes. So I'm just so happy to be here again this summer. I want to thank the summer program staff, David, Alexis, Chandra, Atan, Matt, and Naya. They work so hard with generosity and kindness. It's a pleasure to be in your circle. And I'm excited to hear Cleyvis Natera read tonight after I speak a little bit about my new work. So the class is called Expansive Painting, and the implication is that we're working on the idea of painting in the expanded field. So we use painting through collage, through assemblage, through installation, through sculpture, through interventions on the landscape, and maybe even a little bit of performance if we can get to it. In expansive painting class, I have 9 students, wonderful students this week. And I'm just gonna show, because I'm here for my students and for this like collective, to be in this collective of people, but I just wanna show you a little bit about what they're doing, and I'm gonna talk a little bit about what we did yesterday, just for a few moments. Yesterday we did a exercise called Painting Without Painting, found and bartered color family. And so each student, I just clicked that accidentally, each student was assigned at random a singular color, and they were asked to gather 11 flat, malleable, found color items, as you can see here. Packaging, scraps of collage, paper-like items. And the reason why we did that, which actually derives from Albert's theory, Joseph Albert's theory, is they use those color aid cards to eliminate the idea of brush and painting skill out of painting through found material, and in this case, isolated color or monochromatic color that powers up painting's connotative message. So by eliminating brushwork and mixing color, which is the very most difficult part of painting, some might argue differently from that, it breaks their tendencies and takes out the skill of painting so they don't have to think about it. And what I asked them to do was make an arrangement, slide's a little bit dark, with their singular monochrome color. They began making these arrangements with simply just masking tape, and starting to make these form paintings or collage, because it's really not painting. And this was white, and you have green and red, and just some more examples of them beginning to work in these connotative color, which symbolic color, singular color on its own. And these are the beginning outcomes. This is black, violet, gray. And then I asked them to take that initial layout and get a little bit more intentional with it and go along the contour and cut out a more intentional form, whether that be objective-based, like something in actual imagery, or something abstract. And so they went into it a little bit more to bring out that form and that composition. And then they kind of started talking about it with each other, which was interesting. And then after the third step was that they were asked to collaborate and pluck and fish from other folks' palette to add new color to their work. And by adding an additional color, which a lot of them actually didn't do to the extent that I thought they would, but that's okay. The idea was in day 2 that it was a way to collaborate and connect with each other's projects, offering a comfortability in group feedback and idea exchange for the rest of the week. And so these are the outcomes. Martha, obviously I'm saying the name of the student. Gustavo. Sasha. Gilly. Amy. Katrina. Beth. Liz. And Ingrid. So that's some stuff we've been doing this week. Okay, good, yay. Thanks for the applause, thank you. Thank you, nice. Nice to see some students here. So now I'm going to talk about my work and some other work. And I'm going to show you some very recent work. And I'm going to talk about birds today. So painting is possibly the most ancient form of art used as signage to immortalize the spirit world, as you can see in this early interpretation of a duck-like bird in Bhimbetka cave painting in India, sometime between 30,000 to 10,000 BCE. With this image and approach in mind, it's hard for me to wrap my head around how now painting is a commodity reserved for the wealthy. Such a weight is challenging for a painter to move within a contemporary context. Images of birds have been an ongoing interest of mine, as is in the history of painting. Recently, I reflected on how I depicted birds over the past couple of decades and how it's been depicted by painters historically. It's ubiquitous here on the Outer Cape, the gull, the cormorant, the blue heron traversing through the sky above us. It is often somewhat trite in painting, but my question is how to revitalize the shorebird into something transformative in painting. The bird is a symbol of freedom, showing what humans aren't capable of and honoring other species as important and greater than us. The birds have the ability to escape above, in flight, as opposed to our grounded existence in a difficult society. Let's go back. I tried to photograph birds in flight on the beach this past winter with my iPhone. It's challenging and blurried, but I like how the camera abstracts and essentializes the bird forms from a distance. My partner, Paula, is a birder and self-taught naturalist, so we really with her help, we really pay attention to the birds out here and how they're sort of flying and acting. We live here year-round. Sometimes we go away, but we do live here year-round. And in the winter, as year-round residents, our main pastime is visiting the beaches and woods to see the flora and fauna. Lately, I've revisited some of my early works depicting birds. early attempts to defy and portray birds and how they're usually portrayed. This piece, Pipe Birds, from 2008, almost 20 years ago, I placed the birds in a sort of animated way in an industrial setting on a pipe, flattened perspectives. I don't remember how I got the image, but somehow I painted it, these birds on a pipe, and it was a one-off, never to do any of the same. My concern at the time was putting these birds in a different environment and the painted imagery eliminating the dross or excess description to essentialize a scene. Was a series I actually did of flocks of birds that you see quite frequently traversing these tidal formations, particularly when I was living in Wellesley, which is very tidal, dramatically tidal. And I explored these paintings in limited palettes with lack of detail to flatten the sense of space and create movement, two things I think painting is really good for, sense of flattened space and movement. So this is one example from 10 years ago of my exploration of birds. And then in 2018, I worked on this painting for almost 3 years, even though it's not very large. I started working with collage, and this painting flock was one of my beginning forays into collage. These built surfaces where paper scraps are introduced under, around, and on top of oil paint to increase the tactility and structure of pictures for the use of found and discarded marks in color. So lately, I have been harvesting shapes from found paintings. And I'm just going to be a little snooty here. And these paintings are ones that I find at the dump, at the swap shop, and at flea markets that I deem kind of amateurish or not very resolved. So often they have these beautiful frames, and I'm starting to actually use the frames in some new work, but I'm not going to really talk about that. And to me, these are ready for reconstruction and deconstruction. The act of carving into or cutting into someone else's painting long lost is both tentative and radical. And this is, you're just seeing the back. This was one of my first cutout collage paintings during the pandemic, Flight of 2020. Flight was made from a discarded canvas that my friend Zara Khan gave me. Zara's a known artist here, and she's actually taught here at the Work Center. She was abandoning flat painting to work in a more sculptural and multidisciplinary fashion. The gray area around the bird is her painting, where you see an inverted text written on the right. It says, "I don't," on the right, in a vertical way. And what I did, mostly because it was her painting and not mine, I gave it, and she didn't want it anymore, I cut out the bird from the surface and placed a discarded oil painting of mine underneath the canvas. So this was my painting, this black, and this was her painting, so you can see the edge of the cutout. And when I did this, I felt like the act was really dissonant and kind of radical and a rejection of painting, but mostly a reconstruction of painting. And I'm going to read you a quote about collage from this collagist, Edvard Derkart, who wrote in his book, Collage in the Service of Rebellion. Collage willingly lends itself to rebellion and resistance. The cuts of collage turn downside up, high goes underground, beautiful turns ugly, and the common gets the crown. Everything is possible. These radical cuts appeal to the impatient, everything at once. So I just, part of my practice is looking at other painters' work and also the history of painting and how my work and other people's work fit into these sort of like lineages. And I try to learn a little bit about Provincetown art and beyond that. But I thought, like, what artists out here were using bird imagery that kind of defied the gull or the bird as cliche in artwork. And I thought of Todd Lindemuth, who's, I think they're block prints. He was one of the founders of the Provincetown Art Association and Museum. And I think this is probably around the 1930s. You can see the dates that he lived. And it's interesting because the block print draws out the notion of printing after cutting to reduce a block to make images. So even though this is not a collage, the notion of cutting is in these block prints. And this is Milton Avery, who has been so important to me and so important to so many painters, really, for his use of serenity and harmony in his work, his relationship to the shore here. His color relations are concerned with, are not so much concerned with the illusion of depth, but more about how colors are in relationship to each other and sort of the flatness of field painting. And this piece I was particularly drawn to, and it was around a time in 2021 where I thought, I would really like to appropriate other painters' work and make them my own and use their imagery to make new imagery. And I did this piece. It's a bit dark, but it'll give you an idea. I did this piece called Plunge. And it was from Avery's piece that you just saw. And I was just thinking about how to merge this form of the ubiquitous Cape Cod bird with the ubiquitous Cape Cod material of discarded beach umbrella fabric. It's discarded in trash so often out here, especially after long summers. And I was thinking about the beautiful bird body and how that becomes linked with human consumption and waste, and how that brings up other ideas about the problem of waste and the environmental issues. Here's another one. Soar, sun-bleached beach umbrella fabric and oil on panel. The area here is a chicken wire, but the chicken wire was made by putting the beach umbrella fabric out in the sun and laying the chicken wire on the beach umbrella fabric and harvesting that mark for a series of months through light and shade. So it was like a way of creating different tonalities without actually painting again. And this is another piece that is more, I do a lot of different types of work, and I've done recently a lot of different assemblage paintings, and what you see here is actually one piece of wood sort of glued onto another piece of wood in this edge of the bird. And this was oil on 18th century lumber, and we explored it in that way. So just a different kind of how the lines of the two pieces of lumber become important lines of the composition, and how found information surprisingly becomes integral in the composition as well. So, and then here's after you oil paper and cut out beach umbrella fabric on discarded painting. So discarded painting means a painting that I felt like it wasn't working, so I turned it into something else. And what you see here is this was the discarded painting, this white area, this orange mark, and I cut the shape of the bird, very much influenced by Avery, and out of that fabric and laid it over. And these are copper painting tacks that you use to stretch canvas. Milton Avery was actually influenced by George Braque, and Braque was really known as a cubist, a synthetic and analytic cubist, was doing mirroring the painting, the same paintings of Picasso. But Braque's landscape and more objective work is what interests me much more. This is a painting, a color etching from 1962, and you can see the simplicity of form here and how that influenced Avery. Here's another lithograph. So this is these almost look like cutouts as well, and they're very simplified. And I think by simplification, we get the strong idea of flight and repetition. I just love this. I've seen this. It's Braque's birds on the ceiling of Salle Henri II in the Louvre Museum, 1953. Braque was the first living artist to have a show at the Louvre. And I love this contrast of this modern painting in between 16th century carvings and gypsery. This is an artist who lived out here and in New York named Selena Treve. She died in 2015. Her work can be found at the Berta Walker Gallery. And so I started investigating other artists who were making these bird paintings. And what I love about this painting is the bird is not moving, it's almost perched. And you have this circular gold tondo, and it's like an icon painting from the Middle Ages that seems to present the bird as godlike. And then Susan Rothenberg, who I talk about a lot, she isolated these 4 birds in a shifting scale on a gray ground, where the gray starts to feature red in its purity, and there's not a lot of conflict among colors. And I really admire Susan Rothenberg's history and how in the 80s she helped bring imagery back into painting, much like Philip Guston, within the realm of expressionism, departing from the domination of the New York school and non-objectivity or pure abstraction. And then I looked at this, which I think is so beautiful. It shows a bird from the late Ptolemaic period, which was the Macedonian Greek royal family that ruled Egypt in the 4th century BCE. They ruled from 305 to 30 BCE. It ended with the period ended with the death of Cleopatra. Ooh, geez. Okay. Help. Thanks. You guys always sort out this technical stuff so smoothly. Thank you. So here the falcon. So this is quite old depiction of a bird and like extremely almost detailed. But here the falcon spreads its wings holding a shen ring. And a shen ring is an Egyptian hieroglyphic symbol representing infinity, holiness, and divine protection. With this, I start to think of the birds I construct as protectors who dynamically cut, literally and figuratively, through the landscape. It's typical sublime presentation. And I wanted to really kind of go back to the singularity of the birds and think about how I could sort of drive this sort of cutting aspect and this new way of working that I was discovering. So these are drawings. What I would do is an ink drawing of the bird form. And I've never shown any of this work that you're about to see, so it's really fairly new. And these are cutouts of bird drawings on paper. The bird is cut out, and then there's a void. And then I place the cutout drawing, not the positive, but the negative, on top of scraps of prints and my own painting discards. And this changes typical painting orientation by working from behind an image instead of directly on top of it. And again, the work becomes more dimensionalized. This is a cutout bird on found lithograph, someone else's lithograph. So the work becomes dimensionalized within the assemblage and accentuates the idea of built painting, in this case, drawing, something I can't find in touch painting. Jack Whitten, the painter, called brush painting touch painting. And so I can't paint like this. So I can paint in other ways, but I can't quite access painting like this. It's more built. This year I started doing woodcut, and I think it's a really nice, I do some printmaking. It's always been a side practice of mine, mostly monotype and some etching when I was younger. And I felt like the woodcut was a really good move into exploring this movement, especially with the extraneous marks of what we call the chatter, to express that movement of the bird and that plunging action. And then I really sort of started to switch gears with this, and I started making these cutouts, and I'm going to sort of tell you how these are like this big, like from the microphone, they're about this big. They're not very big at all. They're these cutout paintings. And you go back to the original photographs I showed you of the birds on the beaches. I zoomed in on those on my camera, and I just made these simple ink drawings. I do a lot of ink drawings. It's a painterly medium that I feel like is a drawing medium that pairs really well with my painting practice, and it's very informal, and I can do them kind of quick. And so I started just drawing these birds in flight that I observed photographically. I observed in the field, and then I observed photographically. And I felt, again, like that blurring of the bird in the photograph really lent to the kind of drawing and painting I want to make. So I made these drawings. They're just 11 by 14 drawings with a lot of space around the bird. And then what I do is, now let me see if I can explain this. This is the tricky part. I look at those drawings, and instead of redrawing it on a canvas, I take a canvas that I wanted to revitalize, and I draw with scissors by looking at that image. So I was drawing with scissors. I cut that out of this canvas, and then I placed a monotype behind that image. So there's another cutout, and this is another sort of resurrected painting back here. So this is called Over and Above, and it goes from the photography originally to this, to the collage painting, which is flat. I was doing a lot of assemblage, sort of wall sculpture last year, and now I'm kind of back into the flatness of painting, except these have some dimensions on the surface that the slides don't really represent, to then cutting out. This was left. There was a positive that happened when I cut this out, and then this became the cutout that hangs on the wall. And I would back this floppy canvas with luan, which is like an underlayment for a wood support. You often use it for underlayment for carpet and stuff. And it's a really nice thing to sort of stiffen the work and put it on the wall. And then, so this type of painting I'm doing now, these cutout paintings that are quite small, harken back to some work I was doing in 2023 where I was making these cutout paintings for the first time, trying to drive out of square rectilinear paintings and making form paintings. And a lot of these paintings were homage to other painters I was looking at. So I'm kind of back in that now. Again, drawing to the larger scale painting collage. This is a painting cut out, and behind that is a panel with this sort of found marking to the cutout painting. So there's iterations of the same form, but they take on new life through different applications and adding discarded material and paint to this. I put this drawing, a diamond, on the slide because I wanted you to see how I tweaked it in the painting. And this piece is called Moon Glide, and it's fairly dimensional on the surface. Discarded canvas here, and this is cut out, and another Zarakan painting exists, part of it behind. And you can see the dimension here, like kind of on the side, maybe a little bit. So that was Moon Glide, brand new. Another drawing with India ink and walnut ink. And then Overnight, which is a cut out India ink box placed on a painting, a collage painting of my own making. Here's a small version of that, a small cutout version of that. It's a little bit blurry. And then I started taking these and arranging them in these relationships where birds were kind of flying into each other and flying away from each other. And I started thinking about how these things sort of, some elements are the same and they shift and lend to their own individuality. And the space between these birds have become really important. And then to finalize, recently, Martha mentioned it when she read my bio, I've done some curating, and I curated a show at the Provincetown Museum, which is where I've mostly curated work, of a recently late sculptor named Masereel. And it was a really challenging exhibition. It was large and small scale sculpture, like 100 pieces in a very large room. And we had proposed the show 5 years ago, and in July, it was slated to mount in September of last year, and it did, but unfortunately, Ren died in July. And I was sort of left with I was going to curate it. I proposed the show, but I was left with this sort of solo situation of installing the show, which was a wonderful experience, but it was also very charged because we just lost this important artist in our community. And Ren and I were friends, and I kind of had an idea of what to do, but I didn't really know what to do, and a lot of it was intuitive. But I really started to pay attention to how she built sculpture. And she used a lot of found wood and found material. She also used glass and things like that. But now I have a job cataloging all her work and closing down her studio, which means photographing it and making lists, basically. And when you have the opportunity, it's the second time I've done a project like this, to work very closely with an artist's work, especially who's passed, there's a profound intimacy involved, and it really sinks, at least I'll just speak for myself, it sinks into my work. And it's like having a conversation with the dead, and it's extremely, it continues to be a profound experience. So looking at Ren's work really closely, I found this is actually an elegy to Ren. And this is called Set You Free, and this is Ren's drawing board. She did ink drawings too, although she was mostly a sculptor. And I think you see the ink marks running up and down, which I've sort of painted into. So I used her drawing board with ink marks and cut out this bird form here and collaged it with her. This is a side view. So this is like a kind of an odd shape, this drawing board. She was a woodworker, so she used wood in various ways. But I collaged it with, like, she kept everything. So she had vintage hardware packaging material from like the 70s and 80s, which has these beautiful colors and designs that really don't exist anymore as something being made unless you can find them. And as an elegy to her, I cut this bird out as sort of a way of setting her free and using her hardware packaging to instill some found color and maybe like the slight hint of a word being spoken. This is a detail. And then what happened from the cutout was, this is like one of my most recent pieces, is this bird that's walls painting, sculpture that I dimensionalized a little bit more. So I'm trying to like push that dimensionality of these forms. And Ren knew how to drill a teeny tiny hole into a rock and put a little stick in it and put another little stick on a rock and like fuse those two things together. Work was very delicate and strong, but somehow it gave me the permission to figure out how to join things. And just through that observation of how her work is built, it's taught me a thing or two about my own work and kind of where I want to go. It's just a different view. So that's the same form. And then this is just like a picture of my studio wall that has stuff on it. But again, this is one of the most recent ones, and this is like some kind of art material paper with the bird form. And what I say about this is the cutouts are taking me into another dimension with the packaging material. It's a newfound mark. the packaging presents them anew, and the architecture, and they fly into the architecture of space in this case, which emotionalizes the idea of freedom, yet they still maintain a sense of movement and likeness in their new abstraction. So that's just what I did last week. This one, this is quite dark, but you get a sense of the direction. Oh, and this is the promotional part of the talk. That's it. That's that. That's it with the work. I make prints and collages on paper and drawings, and I show at a wonderful contemporary art space gallery in Wellesley called Farm Projects, and I'm doing a print night on July 27th where I'm just going to show a bunch of my new prints and drawings. So if you're around in town and want to come out and discuss things with me more, and I'll show you some of the other things I've been doing in the realm of flat work, that's happening. And then finally, I have a book, like David mentioned. It's called Mention. And that was produced and self-published by Farm Projects. And it's a picture book. It's a book of photographs and drawings and paintings I've done over the years, photographs I've taken. And really, there are very few words in it, so you don't have to read it. Except you can read the captions. But that's it. Thanks for listening.
Megan Hinton, everybody. Let's have another round of applause. Really happy that you're here this week and part of the Falk family. And thank you. Hang on. Hey, thank you, Martha, for the very nice introduction. And now I'd like to bring up one of Cleyvis's students, Julie Newberg, to introduce Anna.
I'm so honored to introduce Cleyvis Natera to you this evening. When David asked me to do the introduction, I said I'd be happy to. Having never met Cleyvis, I knew, based on my 4 summers at this incredibly magical place called Falk, that she would be marvelous. Not only is she marvelous, she's exceeded all my expectations and has taken me, an anxious, insecure, and novice writer, down a path that has been gentle, joyful, and engaging. Her energy, instruction, and feedback has been nothing short of inspiring. And if you are ever blessed with the opportunity to take a class with Cleyvis, run, don't walk. And I'm not the only one who feels this way. Thanks to Cleyvis, our class is collaborative and loving. I think we might just have the best class here this week. And here's what some of my new friends and fellow writers have to say about Cleyvis. As a very novice fiction writer, Cleyvis has helped me overcome great fear and nervousness. I find her lighthearted style, together with vast knowledge and encouragement, have helped me enormously in just a few days. I'm so glad that Falk has brought her here and that I was able to discover her. Thank you, Cleyvis, and thank you, Falk. Here's another. A writing workshop with Cleyvis is like a green smoothie, chock full of nutrients, fortifying, and also delicious. The perfect balance of rigor and fun. And finally, about her book, The Grand Paloma Resort. The Grand Paloma takes the reader on a Caribbean vacation that is far from typical. We go behind the scenes to experience the resort from the perspective of the staff and gain insights into how the resort influences the lives of the locals as well as the land. The reader also takes a back seat, up-close ride on a mission to uncover secrets and solve a crime. Cleyvis writes with the rigor of an investigative journalist combined with the artistry of a gifted novelist and tells a story that is highly entertaining as well as provocative and eye-opening. If you haven't read it, or her debut novel, Neruda on the Park, you can buy it in the back or at your local bookstore. Now, a little bit about the amazing Cleyvis Natera. Cleyvis is an award-winning author, essayist, and critic. Her debut novel, Neruda on the Park, was a New York Times Editor's Choice and winner of a silver medal by the International Latino Book Awards for the best first book of fiction. Her sophomore novel, The Grand Paloma Resort, was named a best book of 2025 by Elle, Electric Literature, and Crime Reads. Her other writing has appeared in the Modern Love column in the New York Times, Bon Appetit, or is that a typo, David? Bon Appetit? But okay, there's a W there. I was like, I don't know. Bon Appetit, Kirkus, the New York Times Book Review, Time, the Washington Post, USA Today, Pleiades, the Kenyan Review, Asterix, and Quelly Journal, among others. Cleyvis has received awards, fellowships, and artist residencies from the Vermont Studio Center, PEN America, Virginia Center for the Creative Arts, and Hermitage Artist Retreat, among others. She was the recipient of the prestigious Loaf Writers Conference 2024 Toni Morrison Fiction Fellowship. She is currently a Fulbright specialist. She joined Montclair State University in the fall of 2024 as a visiting assistant professor of creative writing, where she currently leads the development of an MFA in bilingual creative writing program. Cleyvis is also part of the creative writing faculty at Barnard College of Columbia University and the New School MFA program. Please join me in warmly welcoming Cleyvis Natera to the podium.
Oh, that was so lovely. I feel like maybe I should just stop while I'm ahead. Thank you so much, Julie. That was really beautiful. And also to my other students. I really love teaching here. I came here for the first time in 2024. And thank you to David for bringing me. Yeah, I just really fell in love with this town. And now I'm part of the board for the Provincetown Book Festival, and I come here every chance I get. So it feels like home away from home when I'm here. So I just wanted to take a moment to thank Megan. I loved your presentation. That was wonderful. David and the entire team. My fellow faculty, I find a lot of inspiration listening to other artists talk. And so this week has already been wonderful. And then my students, I just love you all so much. It's been really energizing. The world is like a scary, terrible place these days. And I find that these spaces really help to ground me and give me a lot of inspiration to go on. Today I'm gonna just talk to you a little bit about the journey of this book. And I think there's quite a bit of overlap with the way that you approached it, because I was thinking a lot about the other writers and artists that impacted this book. So I'll just talk to you a little bit about that, and then I'm going to read a couple of brief sections of the book that I hope illustrate my approach to writing books. So the last time I was here, in 2024, I spent a lot of time talking about the despair of my journey as a writer, because my journey from my MFA program in my early 20s to publication took 15 years. And a lot of that rejection, what ended up happening to me during that time is that I was working a full-time corporate job the entire time, even when I went to graduate school. And, a lot of the despair came from me really questioning whether or not I was talented enough, whether or not I was working hard enough, and it was just like a spiral that went downwards for me as an artist. And I tried to give up writing, but the damn thing wouldn't leave me alone, so I kept getting dragged back. So when I was here in 2024, I spent a lot of time sharing that journey, which was quite painful. the journey to this book was so joyful. So this time I feel like it's a lot more, hopefully more joyful to talk about this journey to getting this book to publication. And the ways in which I think almost like the freedom to create has also further cemented the original goal of my first book. So you still with me? Okay. All right. So when you open this book, there are just a couple of quotes from two books that have really heavily influenced this book. And I'm going to read one of them from Edwidge Danticat, who wrote The Farming of Bones. Have any of you read that book? Okay, a couple of people? Okay. So this is the quote from Edwidge Danticat's The Farming of Bones. And in Sylvie's eyes was a longing I knew very well, from the memory of it as it was once carved into my younger face. I will bear anything, carry any load, suffer any shame, walk with eyes to the ground, if only for the very small chance that one day our fates might come to being somewhat closer, and I would be granted for all my years of travail and duty and honestly gain life that in some extremely modest way would begin to resemble hers. So this quote comes toward the very end of The Farming of Bones. And the first time I read The Farming of Bones, I was in college. I was at Skidmore College. And I read that book with like my jaw on the floor because the book is about a Haitian domestic worker who works for this Dominican family. And it's taking place in 1937, and we follow the protagonist as she is living through the genocide of the Parsley Massacre. And even though I was born in the Dominican Republic, and I lived there until I was 10 years old, I had never heard about the Parsley Massacre until I read The Farming of Bones. And I was thinking, like, this is so crazy because, like, my grandparents were still alive, and they were alive during the massacre. I'd gone to school up until the 5th grade, and no one had ever mentioned this massacre. And in my entire neighborhood, like where I grew up, people talked about other things, right? People talked about history all the time, but they never talked about that history. And so, at the time, I was a very young writer, and I was taking creative writing classes, and I was thinking, like, it's kind of crazy that I'm learning about history through fiction. And it became such a part of who I am as a person that every time I travel back to the Dominican Republic, I felt like these characters were with me. And when I would, as the decades passed, I would think about, like, what would these characters make of what's happening in the Dominican Republic? So in the last couple of decades, birthright citizenship was stripped from Haitians. When I was in the process of writing the initial short stories that would later become this book, there were mass deportations happening to Haitian people. And so I was just thinking a lot about, like, what would those characters make of this, of like what has happened. And so one of the ambitions I had was that I wanted to write a book that would be in conversation with Edwidge Danticat's The Farming of Bones. So, one of the things that I started to think about first was, so what hasn't been done? What hasn't been mentioned about history, like something in history that I know that maybe other people don't know? And so one of the things that happened in the history of the Dominican Republic that I felt like maybe other Dominicans or other people might not know is that in the 1800s, the entire island was occupied by the Haitian president. And he extended an invitation to formerly enslaved and freedmen in Philadelphia to come to the Dominican Republic. And the idea was to form a new freedom state for Black people. And so I found out about that history through a New York Times article. And I was just, again, like kind of struck by how, even though I read a lot of Caribbean literature and a lot of Dominican literature, I had never heard about this history. So when I decided to write the Grand Paloma Resort, and thank you so much, Julie, for the lovely introduction, the conceit of this book is that you are in a very luxurious, like $1 billion resort in the Dominican Republic. And the book is centrally concerned with the workers, okay? So it's a book that really follows a set of workers. There's 2 sisters. Laura is a manager, has crawled her way to middle management, is quite proud of it. Her younger sister, Elena, is a babysitter. They're both desperate to get off of this island. It's not a good place for Afro-Dominicanas. And so they are both very united in their goal to get off of this island. And they just, the chance to leave is right there. Like in 2 weeks, they're gonna get, Laura is gonna get promoted. And if they can just hold it together for the next 2 weeks, they're gonna get off this island and, you know, Laura is gonna get promoted. So part of my conceit with the book was that you're just there for 7 days, and these are the 7 days when these people are working nonstop. And so I wanted to think about, like, how do we include history? And this is like for all of us writers, like how can we think about history in a way that invites curiosity and that doesn't slow the momentum of fiction? Because I think these days, what is demanded of us in fiction is quite different from maybe when I read the Farming of Bones. So I'm just gonna read to you my interpretation of how in this resort, the history of what I just told you about would be presented. There are these letters that come from the resort staff. And so it's like a letter that you would get you know, either through email or under your door each day telling you what's going on that day, okay? The Grand Paloma Resort cordially invites you to the Freedom Sunset Cruise. Paloma Falls was founded to honor the surrounding land's remarkable history. Join our Freedom Sunset Cruise every Thursday to raise a glass of champagne in honor of this rich legacy. A glorious past. During the Haitian invasion of the Dominican Republic in the 1820s and the subsequent 22-year occupation, Jean-Pierre Boyer, then Haiti's leader, extended an invitation to the abolitionists in Philadelphia. He would finance passage and resettlement of as many enslaved people as the abolitionists could muster. The result? 6,000 Black Americans fled to the Dominican Republic, and more than 2,000 ended up staying, surviving, and thriving. It is estimated that of those, a small number of families settled right here on the Pico Diablo mountain. History is alive to this day. The locals celebrate Freedom Day with a delightful annual scavenger hunt every October 2nd. Tracing the footsteps of their ancestors, locals go to the beach, to the stalagmite caves, through the forest, and finally end up hiking to the peak of the mountain, which houses a rock formation that resembles a devil's profile, pointy chin and all. It is because of this rock formation that the local villagers named the mountain Pico Diablo. Children are introduced to the rich history every year. The children chant the community's mantra, I'm a freedom-seeking warrior. In the face of injustice and greed, I stand tall like my ancestors. As each part of the journey is completed, the elders of the community teach their youngest members how to forage for food in the forest and the medicinal purpose of plants. The children also search for hidden spots where locals hide food, water, and treats throughout the year. This generosity ensures that tired visitors can always find a treat in unexpected places. What hospitality, what warmth. Celebrating freedom the Grand Paloma way. Lobster, bluefin tuna, and caviar entrees pay homage to the naval journeys of these ancestors of the idyllic land. With its various spicy rim options, the Diablo rum flight reminds us that even the devil likes to have some fun. Caliente. Sugarcane rum fermented and distilled locally. We hope you love this history as much as we do, your team at the Grand Paloma Resort. So this is, I was thinking a lot about how we commodify history and how a lot of resorts that will have you be scared of your life to get off of the grounds of the resort will then monetize the history and really, in a way, make light of something that, is quite heavy. And then I wanted to read to you one other small section of the book. And so, I mentioned to you that, like, during my journey to becoming a published writer, I had worked in corporate America for 20 years. I became an executive in an insurance company. And during the time when I worked there, I am an immigrant from the Dominican Republic. I came here when I was 10. And everyone in my family, except my younger aunts who went to college, were all people who worked manual jobs. So home health aides and in factories and things like that. When I went to college, I had a lot of manual jobs. So, I spent several summers working, like cleaning dorms, or, part of my work study was cleaning in the cafeteria. When my crushes would come, I would be so upset, y'all. I would be like, oh my God, scraping dirty food, and like the cute guys would come, and I would be like, don't look at me. So, one of the things that happened, like I worked as a cashier in a supermarket when I was really young, when I was like 16 and 17 and 18. And, what I remember from working those kinds of jobs is that, like, you're always up against the clock, right? Like, it's interminable to work the job, but then also the clock never runs out. Like, it's like 8 hours is 50 hours. So, one of the conceits I have for this book is that even I wanted to subvert the idea of the beach read. So the first idea was, let me write my beach read, which would be a book that on the surface is looking at the employees, and it moves fast, and it's kind of like a thriller, but really it's a book that's dealing with heftier ideas around labor exploitation and history, and also like the complicity that people have. Because when I became an executive at my job, now that I've been out of there for 6 years, I look back and I can't believe the things I did, Like, I laid off like thousands of people at one point because we were like offshoring their jobs. And I would sit across from someone who had worked in the company for 30 or 40 years and being like, of course, we're justified to do this. You work here at will. And so, I was thinking a lot about how when we're part of these systems of, economic systems, you end up explaining away and excusing a lot of your own behavior as you climb a ladder. And especially for me as an immigrant, like the idea that I was making more money than my mom ever made, right? Like by the time I had been working at my job for 20 years, like I had made more money than my mom ever made in like 50 years of work, right? So anyway, so I was really interested in like thinking about labor exploitation and how we sometimes contribute to our own exploitation. And so I'm going to read to you from one of the workers. And my students and I have been talking a lot about desire this week. And how do we animate desire? So very early in this book, you find out that Pablo's #1 goal is to get promoted. And he's 2 reviews away from getting promoted. Okay? And at this point in the book, he already got 1 review. And we already know that he's willing to do whatever it takes to get the 2nd review. To complicate matters, Pablo is trying to get his girlfriend back, who left him because she found out he was willing to do whatever it takes to get these reviews. So I'm just going to read to you this section. The only thing that you need to know is that we are here on Saturday, and you've been in the hotel for 3 days. And that during the course of this day, Pablo had to transport a family from the Grand Paloma Resort to the Yellow Paloma Resort, which is like half a day drive away, okay? For the first time in many days, Vida, Pablo's ex-girlfriend, was the furthest thing from his thoughts. When he and the tourist family reached the presidential suite at the Yellow Paloma, Pablo pretended familiarity with the babysitter they met as he made introductions to put that nerve-wracked family at ease. He understood his job in a deeper way. At the Grand Paloma Resort, they'd been trained how to go about rescuing someone's stay, and he'd often assumed that would be necessary after someone had fallen ill due to undercooked or contaminated food, or had had an unpleasant encounter with a local outside of the resort. As the babysitter rushed to get the little girl into a swimsuit and they headed out to the water park, the parents did not move off the couch. Neither had taken a step toward the balcony to stare at the approaching pink sunset, nor had they inquired about their spa credits or asked Pablo to schedule their treatments. They both sat on the couch, not speaking, not moving, obviously waiting for him to leave them alone. He understood that it would be disastrous for him to leave them to speak to each other about what had just happened on the drive. He understood that it would be disastrous for them to speak to each other about what had just happened on the drive without him there to help them reframe. Rescuing their stay meant rescuing the resort. Unbeknownst to Pablo, this was the closest he'd ever come to understanding his boss's mentality, because it wasn't just this couple that would likely never return to the Grand Paloma Resort or to the Dominican Republic, but everyone in their circle. Each time the experience was revisited, it would become more grotesque, incalculably scarier. Soon enough, the mere mention of this island, of the Caribbean as a whole, would evoke in this family and their friends a vision of gunslinging children, ready to city of God any tourists who dare set foot on their land straight to hell. Pablo understood that he had a small window in which to act, influence, correct their narrative. Thank God that just then they were too shocked to tell him to get the hell out. Pablo felt a momentary respite from his loneliness, from the heartbreak he'd been battling. He, an ambassador, responsible for safeguarding the sanctity of his homeland. What did he have at his disposal? Only a diamond-rated playground called a resort, and his body. Pablo called downstairs, asked for 2 pitchers of palomas to be brought to the room, along with an extra bottle of mezcal on a serving tray with all the ingredients to keep the party going. The drinks came insanely fast. He just turned on some Maluma and, hoping for some subliminal messages, played Borró cassette. He unbuttoned his shirt and served them all shots. Pa abajo, pa arriba, pa fuera, pa dentro. Without pressuring the couple in any way, he began to dance, moving his hips. And with the infectious energy of a good beat, he actually began to feel better. The drinks did their work. The wife's face flushed red. The husband removed his Gucci loafers. Her shoulders started moving from side to side with surprising spot-on rhythm. Pablo gestured to the husband, asking if it was okay for him to ask the lady to dance. By way of a response, the husband leaned his athletic body backward and spread his arms on the oyster boucle couch to watch. Pablo kept a respectable distance from the woman, who kept breaching it. She turned away from him and dug her ass into his groin. Coughing, Pablo moved away and extended a hand toward the husband to join. The husband narrowed his gaze, a soft, surprised smile playing on his features as he stared at his drunk wife. He shook his head at Pablo, made some motion with his arms to indicate that they should keep dancing, and stood up. How about another round of shots? The husband said. The wife removed her oversized cotton button-down shirt after she took that shot. Underneath it, she wore a delicate silk camise, the color of the inner curve of a seashell, the color of her tongue as it wetted her lips. She wasn't wearing a bra. Her nipples were erect, maybe from dancing, maybe from desire. Pablo was astonished when she leaned close enough to him that he could feel those hard buds through the soft fabric. He was even more stunned when she leaned up and kissed him full on the lips. It happened so unexpectedly that he kissed her back without thought. It was a few seconds before he came to himself, stepping away from her, bracing himself for the husband rising off the couch and punching him on the jaw. But when he looked at the white couch, the husband was gone. The wife pulled Pablo to her once again, biting his bottom lip, taking his hand in hers and slipping it under that soft camisa to touch her soft, barely bare breasts. He let his body do what it knew to do, easily discarding the shirt, pinching her, returning the bite on her shoulder, leaving a trail of spit as his tongue took that little bud and flicked it. That trail raised delicious goosebumps on her skin. The wife moaned. From down the hall, Pablo heard the husband's voice call out to them both. "Come to bed," the husband said. The wife walked away, leading the way. She threw her arm back, the pinky of her left hand a hook, all those diamond rings on her ring finger sparkling under the overhead lights. The move was so coordinated that it seemed like she'd done it many times before. Pablo instinctively let his pinky strike hers. From somewhere far in his past, he heard the ocean lapping against his father's old boat. He ignored it. That night would prove to be the most humiliating sexual experience of Pablo's life. But just then, Pablo didn't know it. He merely thought, "I can't believe I get paid for this. I can't believe this is my job." That's that section. So the last thing that I wanted to tell you a little bit about this book was about an experience I had here, because I actually went through the last revision of this book while I was teaching. And on one of the nights when I was here, the painter Elizabeth Flood, who's a local artist, did a presentation. And her presentation was all about the landscape. And, you know, a lot of her paintings and her process is that she goes back to the same spot and she'll paint the same landscape throughout a period of time, and then showing like what nature has done to the same spot. And she showed us a lot of those examples. I was so moved by that. Because one of the things that I decided to do with this book is that, you know, my number one protagonist subverts the story of the protagonist's journey in that she refuses to be transformed. And so, you know, one of the big questions I had as I was, you know, going through the last final edits of this book was like, I know that it's deeply unsatisfying, right, to like read about a character who's so stubborn and refuses to change. And listening to Elizabeth give her presentation, it occurred to me that if the world around her changed, then the reader would understand in the ways that she had been transformed, even if she couldn't articulate that. And so anyway, so after the presentation, I went to Elizabeth and I was like, "Oh my God, you're a genius. I love you so much." And she was like, "Back up, stalker." But very graciously, she agreed to let me talk with her the next day. So we went on a walk on the beach. And it was just kind of wild because we shared a lot about like our personal lives and like our journeys. And you know, it just got really like personal in a way. And I realized that what I had been trying to get at was this idea of like forgiveness. And so, you know, a lot of the tourists who travel to the resort travel with the intention of doing harm. And a lot of the employees that we witness also do harm. And a big question is like, why is it that in our society people get away with unforgivable acts, but we are more often focused on like the disenfranchised people that make mistakes and being really harsh and unforgiving to them? So one of the questions that hangs around this book is this idea of, just this idea of like who deserves to be forgiven, and does it matter if like the harm is emerging from a place of trauma and the historic legacy of disenfranchisement. And so anyway, speaking to Elizabeth really helped me. And I can't read you, I was going through it today because I was like, I just want like a perfect little section that I could read to you to see her influence on that last revision. And it is impossible because it's really the journey of the book that, there's a hurricane that comes, and like so much of what happens there is my characters, all of them thinking about how the landscape is witnessing and has both the persistence and the resilience to go on. And that is ultimately what ends up becoming more significant to the journey of these characters. And so, I reached out to Elizabeth to thank her for that conversation. And this week being here and listening to Megan talking about the influence of other artists, I was thinking a lot about both Edwidge Danticat's book and how, sometimes like reading something, when I started thinking about writing a book in response to Edwidge Danticat's book, I never thought I would be in print ever. And so the conversation that I had been having for the last 20 or 30 years is this book. And then also just even spending, 30 minutes listening to another artist talking about their approach can infuse like a whole book. And so I'm very thankful to like the Fine Arts Work Center and to David and to all of you for listening. So thank you.
Okay, another big hand for Cleyvis Natera. And thanks also to Julie for that really sweet introduction. Where'd you go? They're over there. And now I'm going to invite Cleyvis and Megan back up to the stage, and we're going to do a little Q&A. As always, I do. As always, we're live streaming, so wait for Ton to come to you with a microphone if you have a question, so there people at home can hear your questions. Does anybody have a question for our wonderful presenters tonight? I do. Megan.
David?
Can you talk a little bit about how you negotiate that kind of symbiotic relationship that you mentioned early in your talk between sort of like art and money?
Oh, how painting was originally sort of the spiritual signage tool for people to communicate, and how now it's a commodity for the wealthy. How do I negotiate it? Oof. It's tough because I'm fully in it. I mean, I rely on people who have wealth to support my work. I don't rely on them, but I benefit from it, I guess. I do work with a gallery in Wellfleet Farm projects, and we believe in making work accessible to people. And we feel that we need to keep it on the level where it doesn't feel out of reach. And I'm also of the mind that I make a lot of work. Most artists who are prolific and work regularly make a good amount of work. I mean, some artists might make, like a painter, painters might make 25 paintings a year, and some might make 10. But over time, it becomes a burden of material and storage. So I think by making it somewhat accessible for people, it sort of moves it into the world. But I don't know. I mean, I think it's a question of how could we change that way of framing artwork or showing artwork, and who gets to benefit from artwork. And even just bottom line, I'll just finish by saying, why is a museum entry ticket $25 or $30? And I know there's free nights and things like that, but in different countries, there's more funding from governments, and artists in some cases don't pay tax if they're full-time. So I don't know how to answer that, but it's a really good question. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Ooh, feedback.
We can also repeat it.
What is that? Yeah, this is for Cleyvis. I loved both of your talk, Megan. And Cleyvis, I read your first book and I loved it. And I haven't read your second book, although I ran around town today looking for it, and with mixed success at trying to find it. But my question for you, I'm interested in knowing what, if anything, changed for you in writing between your first and second books.
Oh, thank you for that question. Can you hear me? So yeah, I think a lot changed for me. You know, when I was working on my first book, I was working full time. You know, I really had to like borrow the time. Like I was getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning before work and before my kids were up to write. You know, just and I also have to say, like, there's something that, like I mentioned earlier, happened to me where. Like, I just wasn't sure that I was any kind of writer because all I faced was rejection, you know? And so, you know, the thing that happened to me when I decided to come back into writing during the pandemic, a few years before the pandemic, is that I felt like this abundance and like almost like a fearlessness to like go for it. And I didn't know whether or not it would result in actually making an income or like being able to ever quit my full-time job. But I started writing essays and I started writing criticism, and I was like, I'm a writer of some kind. And if, you know, like the trick is that if you're willing to write for free, you can build quite a successful career. And nobody had told me that, you know, because I grew up poor. So if somebody has said to me, oh, you got to put in a lot of free labor into this kind of career before it takes off, you know. And there's different ways to make a career, I should say, but at least for me, that's the way it worked out. So, you know, I should say that, like, for me, the first book also was really caught up in my own experience, like writing about gentrification in Harlem, writing about displacement of immigrants. That's a lot of it, you know, had to do with my own experience. And with the second book, I just felt, first of all, I sold the second book without finishing it, which also nobody had told me that could happen. So my editor, you know, we were off of the success of Neruda on the Park, and she hadn't bought any novels that year. And she was like, do you have a novel? And I was like, of course I do. I went to my agent, I was like, I have no novel, but I have a short story collection. And so he and I worked to put together you know, just like an outline and some sample chapters. But we sold that book in 2 weeks. I mean, not even 2 weeks. I think it's just whatever the process was for her to go to her boss and get the thing approved. And so, you know, the difference was then that I was working on this second book under contract, and then also working with an editor who like then was reading it and giving me feedback. And so it was really interesting for me because I was like, there was a part of me that was like, you know, when she asked to see it as I was going, I was like, nope, like I'm gonna give you the whole thing when I'm done. And I actually really love my editor. We, you know, through this first two books, we had just a wonderful relationship. But it was very different because I also felt like the shift for me was going from like working on a dream that might never come true to then thinking about writing books as a job. And then also being like, what are my non-negotiables? Like, what am I not willing to forfeit, you know, to get them to get their money's worth, right? So, like, I knew that I wanted to subvert. If I had written about some, like, employees going around and, you know, pulling some lovable pranks, I'm sure the book would have done better, right? But I also, you know, like, I interviewed dozens of people that worked in hotels. I spoke to sex workers, like, you know, I was thinking about mass deportations. I was thinking about birthright citizenship, you know, because these are all the things that were happening here. So part of what I wanted to do with this book was to talk about the United States without talking about the United States. And so, you know, I was very fortunate because my editor really believed in it. And like even the heavier parts of the book, she believed in the purpose of why those exist in the book. And the book has been more, you know, I mean, it's done better commercially than my first book. So I think that it's also given me that kind of confidence. And now I'm here working on my third book and revising my third book here. And so, yeah, it's, thank you for the clap. It's just my students. They're like, but yeah, so like, thank you for that question. But the shift has been really, really different. But I do think there's a way in which we can like make a living off of our books and still stay true to what we need to say as writers and artists.
Thank you. I enjoyed both talks. I'm in Megan's current workshop. I have a question, Megan. I don't know your earlier work, but you were introduced as sort of genre-defying, genre-bending, and the work you showed us is very comfortable and can fit in sort of different genres and expanding painting. Was there a point in your life and in your work's development that you remember yourself becoming more comfortable doing that? Or have you always?
Comfortable working in
Just
outside of
Yeah.
just direct painting on canvas?
Yeah, and thinking, oh, well, this is.
I got tired of stretching canvases. No. I'm just kidding. I kind of did, but in my early 40s, I just wanted to see what else I could do. And I believe as artists in developing skill in outside of what we're comfortable with, and I think I don't identify as a sculptor, but I think about things very sculpturally, and I sort of want to challenge that in myself of like how I could also be more of a sculptor in my work. It was about 10 years ago that I wanted to push myself out of direct painting on canvas, just to. I'm also, I mean, I work in series like the birds, and I feel like after about anywhere between 10 and 20 pieces, things get exhausted, and I'm kind of on to the next move, and a lot of times my viewers have a hard time catching up with me, they kind of come around eventually, and I'm kind of known for doing different things, and I think that kind of irritates people, but not irritates, but it's not, I'm not sticking with the same thing, and I think it's part of my interest in making different moves and just opening that up. Yeah. I have a question for you. Do you read beach novels?
I've read some.
Yeah.
I definitely read some. I have like this curiosity about what makes books successful, because it seems to me that like us Black women, like women of color, seem to not be working under the same rules as other people when it comes to like success. And so I'm always really curious. Like, someone has said to me that like they thought that the book was heavier than they expected. This is what I hear a lot of times when I show up to the book clubs. They invite me, and they're like, "We really love this, but boy, this is not a beach read." And I was like, "I don't know who told you it was a beach read." Like I didn't say it was a beach read. And so so I read. The thing that struck me when I started reading a lot of summer books that took place in the Caribbean that had been really successful here is that all of them were like these people go to the Caribbean and they have these kind of transformative experiences that have nothing to do with the place. Like they could be in any island, they could be doing anything. Like the place has nothing to do. And so like part of what I wanted to do with this book is to show that if you write a book about an island, everyone in that island, like their whole journey has to do with what is in the soil, what is in the history. Like even if the people are not going to speak directly about the history, like in this book, the people don't talk about the history. They don't talk about the mass deportations. They don't talk about the inequality. But it's so much a part of what everybody is. And so for me, it's been really interesting, like coming up against this idea of like a beach read.
I think it's really great.
Yeah. Do you guys have more questions?
One more question? There we go. Hang on.
Thank you. Thank you both. I guess this is geared towards Megan. When you were showing the history of Brock and Selena, they're just really powerful, because not only does it relate to your work, but you're bringing back parts of people's work that I haven't quite, like Selena's I know, but Brock's work I know, but I haven't seen those particular pieces. Or the ceiling, it's almost like a frame within those pieces, which was really ornate, and that's just incredible. I guess my question in a way is, you're finding discarded frames and paintings. So I'm living with, like, through an estate someone gave me, these enormous canvases. And every time I'm looking at the canvases, I can't cut into them. And I'm seeing more and more in the canvases. And so it makes me want to research more and more about this artist that passed away. And so I love that you said, you know, it's like I'm looking at this work and it doesn't, I don't feel like it's not accomplished, or it doesn't feel finished, and then you're going into it. I'm having a hard time going into these pieces because every time I'm living
hard.
with them, I'm feeling it's deeper and deeper because it's a layered piece. And they're probably, I don't know, 60 by 80. They're pretty big pieces. And this other painter doesn't work on canvas, so that's why they were given to me. And so I was just wondering how you decided to, like, just attack it. Just get in there and say, oh, I'm just going to start cutting out these pieces and reassemblage.
Yeah, it's not always easy, and I have a large collection of things that I've not cut into or destroyed or restructured. I think it goes along with this idea of impermanence and our lives as impermanent and material as impermanent. Like, most likely the paintings will exist well beyond our lives, whether they're in the corner of a flea market or in someone's basement. But I do think that by either using those paintings and the found marks of those paintings, in a way I'm kind of resurrecting them. And eventually my painting with the found mark might go in the corner of a basement and never be seen again. But in the meantime, while I'm actively showing my work and involved with showing it to folks, that action is a way of being in conversation with someone from another time. And I think it opens up a space of communing or being together that's outside of how we exist with people in a conversation. And painting really is about, this is what happened, and then this is what happened, and this influenced this person, and that lineage of painting. And I'm sure it's the same with writing and music and all the arts. And I think that kind of accentuates that experience for me, and it takes out my hand and my ego out of my work a little bit, that I need to just sort of bring it into something that's a little bit more authentic and a little bit less about myself, even though I'm taking someone's painting and cutting it up and covering it with some more paint. But the residue of their painting is there. And I think I would want someone to do that with my painting. I think I would want someone to use it. But it wasn't easy, but it's incredibly thrilling.
I just really loved watching that. Because I think, like, when you first started talking about it, I was like, clutching my pearls, like somebody else's art. But then I saw how, you know, even this idea of, like, your interpretation brings new life to something that has been discarded. Yeah. And it's just really powerful.
Yeah. I mean, I found a lot of paintings I would never, ever do this to. You know, I found really beautiful things. And it's just a way of kind of what's like the Marie Kondo. What does it bring you joy? This painting does not really bring me that much joy, so I'm going to cut into it. But this painting really doesn't. I'm just going to leave it alone and look at it and maybe hand it on to the world. So I don't know. I'd be curious if there's a way that people do that with writing. If they use, like, if you can reconstruct someone's writing, you can't like physically cut it up.
Well, but I think everybody, like, all the time, I think we all hear about these retellings of the fairy tales, retellings of
the beach novel.
The beach novel.
Yeah.
One of my really good friends just did a new take on The Great Gatsby. And I read her book, which was just about, you know, these Puerto Rican people in Brooklyn. It's called Last Night in Brooklyn. It's wonderful. But I was moderating a talk with her, so I reread The Great Gatsby. And it was
first of all, The Great Gatsby is a great book, and I had to read it for an assignment, so I think I had blocked from my head, like, how it's dealing with class and with money and with privilege in, like, this really kind of interesting way. But my friend did it from, like, the perspective of a brown woman. And it just was, like, so fascinating, like, if you just gender bend it, like, how the story becomes so different. And so I think, like, writers are very often revisiting or following the tradition of, you know, writing about artwork or, like, different things that people will revisit the same painting. I've seen poets do that quite a bit, and I find that really inspiring.
Yeah. I mean, with your reading, I was like, oh, she's sort of start talking about sex. Oh, no. Like, not that I'm a prude, but it's illicit. It's like infusing something illicit that's like a little edgy and a little bit like unexpected, you know. It's
I'll just say about sex that
please say.
Yeah, because because let me just say this, okay? Like, one of the reasons why I think it took me such a long time to break through is because, like, when I was writing like these precious quiet stories, there was no place in the market for someone that looks like me to write those books, right? And so it took me just a really long time to recognize that, like, the things that I'm best at in fiction are the things we're not supposed to do. Like, I don't fade to black. Like, somebody's nipple's gonna be in somebody's mouth. and you know, and for me, it's like, yeah, and we're gonna talk about complicity. And we're gonna talk about the fact that, like, you're putting yourself in a dangerous situation. And we're gonna talk about the danger of power dynamics, because when you think about it from a woman's perspective, everybody's kind of numb to it. Like, nobody really cares so much about, like, sex trafficking of women because, like, it's just been told too many times. But when I made the person that's, you know, in these sexual situations male, I feel like it energized the story. So even this idea of, like, agency, like, and power dynamics is different when you have a man who's having. And also, sex is good until it's not, you know?
Exactly.
And so, I don't know, like, I think about that, and I was like, oh, you know, like, part of my breakthrough, I think, was thinking about the fact that I never would have succeeded if I kept writing the stories the way that I was taught to do it, because that is not what I'm concerned about or my community is concerned about. And so, yeah, like, I also like writing about sex, but I also think it's, like, the context of it.
Right, right. I think everyone was listening.
I think we're going to wrap it up. Maybe we want the live stream. Thank you again to Cleyvis Natera and Megan Hinton. Woo. Remember, they'll both be signing books at the back. Check out the stuff that's available back there. You have a free evening tomorrow, but come back on Friday for the student showcase. Yes, it'll be great. Thank you, everyone.